This fine morning.
Was.
Amen to that. Yesterday was the day of remembrance for aborted, murdered children, and there's a cemetery at Assumption Grotto Church over on Gratiot. There's a cemetery at Assumption Grotto Church over at, this mic has a lot of reverb to it. At Assumption Grotto Church over at 6 Mile, McNichols and Gratiot, there's a church that actually has taken the remains of quite a few aborted babies and buried them there. And yesterday was the day of remembrance, and I guess I posted a couple provocative things on Facebook that people took exception to. We should as a church stand up and deal with some of these things. A lady said that it's just a cluster of cells, it's not a child. Well, I don't know how you can say that from conception on it's not human life. And even as early as 3 weeks after conception, there's a brain in this human embryo. There's a heartbeat in 5 weeks in development. So I don't know how you could say it's not a human body or a human person. It's not a cluster of cells. The world is so misinformed. And then another person says, well, the pastor is a MAGA Republican, Trump-supporting, racist man, blah, blah, blah. He follows the future Antichrist president, former President Trump. And, quite honestly, in this election cycle, there's nobody that I like as president. But I know that there's one party that pushes abortion and other ungodly things more than the other. I'm not happy with the way things have been in the last 3.5 years or 4 years. If you want more of that, it's your choice. You're an American. You can vote as you choose. I'm not happy with the other side. I wish we had better choices in terms of a president. And there was a third person that says, the problem with this church is there has to be the keep your church and the state separate. I mean, if God's just in compartments in your life, you have a real problem with God. So you better check your theology. And, that's kind of the problem that we have in America. In the early 1900s, the Bible was the textbook for public schools. I'm not talking about for private schools. I'm talking about for public schools. And it wasn't just a book of literature that they read. It was a book used for doctrine. It was a book used for correction. It was a book used for teaching values. And then there was a number of people that opposed having the Bible as the primary textbook in schools. So they stopped having the Bible in public schools. And then in the 60s, we took prayer out of schools by a Supreme Court order. So little by little, we've taken God pretty much out of everything. And then we told people that you can't have the 10 Commandments on public property. So we took the 10 Commandments out of a lot of public places. The same Supreme Court that says you can't have the 10 Commandments in a public place have the 10 Commandments carved in stone above where they sit to govern and to rule. So if you go to the United States Supreme Court, you'll see the 10 Commandments carved in stone above the heads of the Supreme Court justices that say you shouldn't have the 10 Commandments in a public place. What irony is that? Actually, it's lunacy to think you can't have the 10 Commandments in a public place according to the court, the same court that has them engraved in the walls of the Supreme Court. So make sense of that. And then if you go over to Congress and you go to the rotunda, that big dome that you see in Washington, it's often photographed. Inside that rotunda are statues And if you look at the statues, the center statue in the rotunda is Moses, the great lawgiver. And it's interesting because if you look closely at the statues, all the other statues of all the other great men from history, they're all facing Moses. Somebody forgot to take Moses out of the Capitol, but one thing most people don't understand either is our Capitol used to be a church.
Amen. Wow.
Before all of this liberal crazy stuff happened, in the early days of America, the United States Capitol was a church on Sunday morning where they actually taught the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yep. Amen.
I mean, people don't know their history, so they're bamboozled to think, oh, there's a separation of church and state. They held church in the United States Capitol every single Sunday. And some news reports say it was the biggest church this side of the Mississippi in the United States Capitol, in Washington, D.C., where our legislators met. And now they're just lost their senses and think that the church and state should be separate. I went to a meeting yesterday. There was an apologist, young lady. Well, everybody's young compared to me, I guess, anymore. But she was probably in her 20s, maybe early 30s. I don't know her exact age, but she was talking about the abortion issue at another church. And so I went there to listen, and very insightful. There are some young people that actually connect the dots and get it. And we need to support more young people. Otherwise, I mean, it's just going to be more of the same. And if you're happy with more of the same, I would also encourage you to friend me on Facebook. I don't do a lot on Facebook. I post a lot of things on Facebook. All of them, the majority of them are godly things. And also like our own personal Harvest Time Christian Fellowship page as well. And look at some of the comments, and if you see people that are out of order, I've personally never blocked anybody on Facebook, so I just keep it open for whatever people want to say. But if people say things that are just out of order, it's the church's job to be salt and to be light. Sometimes salt, when there's an open wound, you pour it on there, it stings. And it's funny because on the farm, we used to have salt blocks for our animals. Cows used to lick salt blocks, and our pigs used to have mineral salt blocks. And they licked those as well. And if you got cut or hurt on the farm and you were bleeding, my grandpa would say, chip a piece of that block off and put it on there. And where you're bleeding, it'll stop the bleeding. It'll stop the bleeding, but it's going to hurt a little bit. It stings. Putting salt on an open wound, salt will clean a wound. Before there was antiseptics and triple antibiotic creams and all that stuff you get at the drugstore. When you're out in the barn and you don't have all the stuff, or out in the field and you don't have all the stuff, a good piece of salt helps. But we're called to be salt and light. Our dark world's getting darker and darker and darker, and we as Christians have to stand up. I don't believe in the separation of church and state. I mean, that's another thing that people think is supreme. It was a decision by the Supreme Court not that many years ago, and it was based on a letter that was written by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists, or they wrote back and forth, and Thomas Jefferson mentioned the separation, but he wasn't speaking about the separation that people think today. They think of a hard line separation of church and state. What Jefferson was actually talking about is there wouldn't be one national religion. That was the separation, that there wouldn't be a national religion pushed on people. People could worship and the Danbury Baptists were concerned because they thought there would be a national religion that the founding fathers and the early fathers of our country would push on people. And they wanted to be able to, they left religious tyranny when they came to this land. They didn't want religious tyranny when they got here. They wanted the freedom to worship and believe as they saw fit. So they didn't want the government to dominate and dictate religion. We're in a mess in America. I mean, the choices for president are slim and none, but even with the choices we have, there's a clear choice that's more godly than the other. And some people I've talked to recently, they're like, I'm not voting because there's no good choice. Well, vote for the less of the two evils then. Because you can either have a lot of evil or the lesser of two evils. I mean, as Americans, if you don't voice, you're going to get what you get. And so you have to speak up. And, there's just a lot of nonsense. I mean, we just had this crazy debate on Tuesday between the presidential candidates. I wish they would have kept it a little more fair, but it is what it is. Lots of lies, lots of stories on both sides. I'm not talking about one side or the other. I'm saying a whole bunch of garbage all the way around. I wish there was a better candidate, but I can't support anybody that supports the killing of babies. And I went to a Catholic cemetery yesterday where they buried babies that were aborted. If that doesn't bother you, I don't know what would. And this lady that talks about a cluster of cells, it's not even a human. They're out of their minds because they've been so brainwashed by the world. They don't even know what they're talking about. I'm not talking about just from a biblical standpoint. Everybody knows that life begins at conception. Any scientist that has a brain will tell you that life begins with two cells come to intersect. The male sperm and the female egg come together. That's where life begins. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. And any reasonable scientist, and there's millions of them, that would tell you life begins at conception. There's no other way. And the development happens fairly quickly. Like I said, the brain is 3 weeks, is apparent 3 weeks after conception. And most people don't even realize they're pregnant in the first 3 weeks. And there's already a brain being formed. There's a heartbeat in 5 weeks. And, we have to do what we can do to make the best choices possible. There were some cards that they passed out in some literature. Life is the other choice. And on the back, it's got the website for therightolife.org. And it has a voting guide in terms of the candidates that are most aligned with the values of life. And so if you want one of these, I have some of these. But, we have to really think about life. I'd hate to get to heaven and, have God ask me, well, what did you stand for? I stood for the people that, wanted the ways of the world more. I mean, because God's going to ask you, what did you do for me? What did you do for my kingdom? How did you support me? What banner did you lift up? Or did you just cave in and go with the world? Life really is the other choice. And it was funny because there was a young girl yesterday, and she said, well, I've been raised in a family where my parents are both pro-choice. They believe in, choices. I said, I'm pro-choice too. I believe in choices. Make better choices before you do behavior that causes things that you don't want. I talked to a young man that's incarcerated this week, and my wife says I should stop taking those calls. They cost too much. But, I told him, you do stupid stuff, you win stupid prizes. Yep. And because he's like, Pastor, my bond's only $5,000, and if you put up $500, I could probably get out of jail. But I do have this other court case, and so I have a hold, so we got to go to this other court and see what the bond's going to be there. And it's like, stop. You know, you did a bunch of stupid stuff. You won stupid prizes. That's the way it goes. That's why you're in jail. And, you know, there's consequences. You know, the thing is, when we get angry, when we get out of our minds and do stuff that we normally wouldn't do, that's why a fruit of the Spirit is self-control.
Amen.
You know, we have to learn to control ourselves. That's a fruit of being godly, is self-control. So many cool things have happened in the last few days. Sue and I had the opportunity to go down to Florida. We met with some architects about future plans that we're thinking about in terms of church, and that was pretty cool. We went to see this movie after church last Sunday. The movie's called The Forge. You got to see this movie. I mean, this movie was so moving, and I don't know if you guys know who Miss Claire is. She says the Kendrick brothers have a series of movies, and one of their previous movies is War Room. And there's this little black lady who reminds me of my late wife. Her name's Miss Clara. You know, we're going to solve this problem with prayer. I got this little prayer closet. I'm going in my prayer closet and I'm going to start praying. You know, that was my late wife. And Miss Clara shows up in this new movie called The Forge, and there was this young man stuck on video games, stuck on stupid, no motivation, stuck on the world, doing all this stuff, disrespecting his mom. His mom was a single mom. And his whole life got turned around. You guys got to see that. The teens are going to see it this afternoon, and it's just a phenomenal movie of how, when you change your focus, how things can change. And you know, they told this young man, I'm not going to give away the whole story, that, you know, you got to change some things if you want something different. You know, Einstein says, you know, you can't expect anything different if you keep doing the same things. You know, one of the guys that I talked to that's locked up this week, he's like, I wish I would have listened to you. Because if I would have listened to you, you're my spiritual father, I wouldn't be in prison.
Amen.
This was a different guy than I referred to as the other guy. And this is a guy that's locked up, and he's doing 9 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections over a woman. And, you know, you make poor choices, you win stupid prizes. And I told this young man, actually the way it started was, I just need $130 for a round trip bus ticket to Columbus, Ohio. I said, this girl caused you problems in Michigan. You think just because she moved to Ohio, she's changed? I said, you go down there, you're going to have bigger problems down there than here. Oh, that's not true. Just give me $100. I want to see my baby, and I want to see my baby mama. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. That was my advice. I ain't giving you a dime. So he found the money. He went down there. He didn't know at the time that when she moved down there, the reason she moved down there is she got married. So her new husband is out west working, and she calls up her old flame from Detroit, says, come on down, I need something. I want to hang out with you. So he did that. Dumb. You know, I could make a sermon series called Dumb and Dumber. And Straight Up Stupid on top of that. So I told this guy, don't do it, don't go down there. You know, she's already caused you a lot of problems. She already had you locked up on false craziness up here. And I'm not saying all the cases are false, but I know the parties involved, and the case up here was a bad case. It wasn't a real case. But so he went down there, hung out with her for a couple of weeks while her husband's working out west and not home. And then he said, well, you know, I got to use this bus ticket within 14 days, so I got to get back home. And she said, oh, stay a little longer because, you know, my man's not coming back for another couple weeks. And he said, no, I got to go because if I don't use this ticket now, I won't have a ticket home. So he decided to leave. She didn't want him to leave. She called the sheriff. He broke into my house. He raped me. He kidnapped me. He held me hostage for 2 weeks. And so the sheriff arrested him. Those multiple felonies that he was charged with were going to give him about 60 years in prison. So on the second day of trial, he pled guilty and they sentenced him to 9 years. In Ohio, you don't get credit for good time. You don't get credit. If you get 9 years, you serve 9 years. So he's a little past halfway. And every time I talk to him, and I just talked to him a couple of days ago, he said, "You're the only one that speaks truth to me. I wish I would have listened." And so sometimes some of us have to listen. We have to speak up. Even when it's painful, even when, it's difficult. You got to speak up. You got to say what you got to say, and you got to do what you got to do, because otherwise you just get carried away with feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotions, they'll take you down the wrong path every time. And especially young people, they have all this anger, craziness. Yesterday at Speedway, this guy was ringing his stuff up, and then his girlfriend or significant other was next to him, and she thought that they were overcharged. They literally threw hot coffee and pop on the clerk at Speedway.
Wow.
And I'm standing there thinking, what is this world coming to? And then
Baseball game.
it's crazy. Right here in Warren.
Wow.
I'm not talking about, someplace else. I'm talking about here. You just living in a crazy world. But 2 things that I ask of you this morning, like us on Facebook, and then it's crazy because we give food to 7,000 people a month.
Amen.
This last month it was 7,347? 46. Oh, I'm off by 1. Oh, somebody's going to post online that the pastor lied. I missed one. 746. I said 7. I misspoke. Sorry. I didn't write the number down when my wife told me. So I'm human, if you didn't know that. And, we have like 130 Google reviews. And we've been doing church for 33 years. Somebody's,
Amen.
the negative people always get to stand out because they're the ones that post stuff. But where's all the positive people? Where's the people that have good things? Where's the people that have been blessed? Where are the people that have been helped? There's a number of positive things, but there's some really goofy people too. And, you got to push back. I'm not going to shrink into a hole. Let them say what they want to say, but I'm not going to just let them ride roughshod over us. Today I want to talk about knocked down, but not knocked out. We're continuing my message from Corinthians, and